What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors finally reaches his breaking point with a talk show host who's crossed every line? Tonight we're diving into the explosive confrontation that had everyone talking. The moment Ryan Gosling walked onto Jimmy Kimmel Live and everything went sideways. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is the story of what happens when politeness meets its match against relentless provocation. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because this story will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about late-night television. The stage was set like any other Tuesday night taping. The familiar blue and orange backdrop glowed under the studio lights as Jimmy Kimmel adjusted his tie, that trademark smirk already forming across his face. He'd been planning this interview for weeks, and everyone in the building could sense something different in the air. The production assistants whispered among themselves. The camera operators seemed more focused than usual, and even the studio audience felt the electric tension that comes before something memorable happens. Ryan Gosling walked onto the stage. With his usual calm demeanor, that subtle nod to the crowd, the genuine smile that had made him a favorite among fans worldwide. He settled into the guest chair, straightened his jacket, and looked directly at Kimmel with the kind of respect that comes naturally to someone who's spent years perfecting his craft. What he didn't know was that Kimmel had spent the better part of his preparation time digging through old interviews, looking for pressure points, searching for the exact words that would get under Gosling's skin. "Ryan, welcome back to the show," Kimmel started, his voice carrying that familiar tone that regular viewers knew meant trouble was brewing. "I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me for a while now. You know, I've been watching your career and I keep wondering, do you actually enjoy acting? Or are you just really good at pretending to care?" The question landed like a slap. Gosling's eyebrows raised slightly, a micro-expression that the cameras caught perfectly. He leaned forward, maintaining his composure, but clearly processing what had just been said. "That's an interesting way to start an interview, Jimmy. I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at." Kimmel's grin widened. "Well, it's just that you have this reputation for being so serious, so method, so into your craft. But then I watch some of your movies and I think to myself, is this guy actually feeling anything? Or is he just really good at looking like he's feeling something? There's a difference, you know." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the usual playful banter they were used to seeing. Gosling sat back in his chair, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Jimmy, I've been acting for over 20 years. I've worked with some incredible directors, incredible actors. Every role I take on, I give everything I have to it. So when you question whether I care about what I do, you're not just questioning my work, you're questioning my integrity." "Oh, integrity," Kimmel repeated, drawing out the word like it was somehow amusing. "That's a big word, Ryan, but let's talk about integrity for a second. You've made some pretty questionable movie choices over the years. The Notebook, sure, that was cute. But then you go and do something like Blade Runner 2049, and I'm sitting there thinking, why does this guy always look like he's about to cry? Is that your thing now? The perpetually sad pretty boy?" The tension in the room was palpable now. Gosling's hands, which had been resting casually on the armrests of his chair, were now gripping slightly. His voice remained steady, but there was an edge creeping in. "Jimmy, I'm not sure what kind of interview this is supposed to be, but if you invited me here just to mock my work, maybe we should have a different conversation." Kimmel leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. "Come on, Ryan, don't be so sensitive. This is just entertainment. But since we're talking about your work, let's talk about La La Land. You know what I think about La La Land? I think it's the most overrated movie of the last decade. You and Emma Stone dancing around Los Angeles like you're in some kind of fever dream. And somehow that gets you an Oscar nomination? I mean, congratulations, but seriously, that was the moment something shifted in Gosling's demeanor. His composure, which had been hanging by a thread, finally began to crack. "You know what, Jimmy? I've been coming on talk shows for years, and I've dealt with hosts who ask tough questions, hosts who challenge me, hosts who want to dig deep into the work. But what you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's not entertainment. It's just mean-spirited. Mean-spirited? Kimmel laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. Ryan, this is late-night television. If you can't handle a little ribbing, maybe you should stick to dramatic roles where you can just stand there and look contemplative. That seems to be your specialty anyway. The audience was completely silent now. Even the camera operators were, glancing at each other, unsure of how to handle what was unfolding in front of them. Gosling stood up from his chair, not dramatically, but with the kind of deliberate movement that suggests someone has made a decision. Jimmy, I came here tonight, as a guest on your show, with respect for you and for your audience. But what you're doing right now, this isn't about entertainment. This is about you trying to tear someone down for your own amusement, and I'm not going to sit here and be part of it. Kimmel's expression changed for just a moment, a flicker of something that might have been uncertainty. But he quickly covered it with another laugh. Oh, come on, Ryan. Don't be such a drama queen. Sit back down, let's finish the interview. We haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. Good stuff? Gosling repeated, his voice dropping to a tone that made everyone in the studio lean forward. He remained standing, looking down at Kimmel with an expression that was part disbelief, part controlled anger. Jimmy, what exactly do you think the good stuff is? More insults? More attempts to humiliate me in front of your audience? Because if that's your idea of good television, then you and I have very different definitions of entertainment. Kimmel waved his hand dismissively, that smirk never leaving his face. Ryan, you're taking this way too seriously. This is just how these things work. We poke fun, we laugh, we move on. You think you're the first actor to sit in that chair and get their feelings hurt? Please, sit down, let's talk about your new movie and then we can all go home happy. But Gosling didn't sit down. Instead, he took a step closer to Kimmel's desk, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. You know what, Jimmy? I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about me always looking like I'm about to cry. And you're right. About one thing, I do feel things deeply. But the difference between you and me is that when I feel something, it's real. When you feel something, it's calculated. Everything you're doing right now, every insult, every attempt to get a rise out of me, it's all designed to create a moment that you can use for views and clicks. The studio fell even quieter, if that was possible. Kimmel's assistant, standing just off stage, was frantically gesturing to the producers in the booth. This was clearly not going according to plan. Kimmel himself seemed to be realizing that he might have pushed too far, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Wow, Ryan, that's quite a speech. Very dramatic. Very, what's the word, method. But here's the thing. This is my show. This is my stage. And if you don't like how I run things, there's the door. Gosling nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting exactly that response. Your show, your stage. You're absolutely right about that. Jimmy? But let me ask you something. When you go home tonight, when you look in the mirror, are you proud of what you do here? Are you proud of the way you treat people who come on your show as guests? Because I've been watching you for years, and I've seen how you operate. You build people up just enough to tear them down, and you do it all with a smile. Oh, here we go, Kimmel said, rolling his eyes theatrically for the audience. Now I'm getting a lecture on ethics from someone who pretends to be other people for a living. Rich. Really rich. You know what your problem is, Ryan? You take yourself too seriously. You think because you've been in a few good movies, because critics like you, because you can brood on screen, that somehow makes you better than the rest of us. But you're just an actor, buddy. You're just a guy who reads lines that other people write. That was the moment when Gosling's carefully maintained composure finally cracked completely. His voice, when he spoke, was steady but filled with a cold. fury that made everyone in the room understand they were witnessing something unprecedented. Just an actor? Jimmy, let me tell you what I am. I'm someone who has spent his entire adult life trying to tell stories that matter, working with people who care about their craft, pushing myself to be better every single day. And yes, I take that seriously because it matters. What you do here, Jimmy, this also matters. You have a platform. You have influence. You have the ability to lift people up or tear them down. And night after night, you choose to tear them down. Kimmel was no longer smiling. The realization that this situation was spiraling completely out of his control was written all over his face. Look, Ryan, maybe we should take a break. Talk about this off camera. No, Gosling said firmly. No, we're not taking a break. You wanted good television, Jimmy? You wanted a moment? Well, here's your moment. You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to humiliate me, questioning my integrity, mocking my work, and treating me like I'm some kind of prop for your entertainment. And you know what the saddest part is? Your audience deserves better than this. They come here expecting to learn something about the people they admire, to have a few laughs, to feel connected to something bigger than themselves. Instead, you give them this manufactured cruelty. The camera operators were getting signals from the booth now, but nobody seemed quite sure what to do. This wasn't a typical celebrity meltdown. This was something else entirely, something more articulate and more damning. Kimmel tried to regain control. Ryan, I think you're overreacting here. This is just late-night television. It's not that deep. It's not that deep? Gosling's voice rose for the first time during the entire exchange. Jimmy, everything is that deep. Every interaction we have with another human being matters. Every time we choose kindness or cruelty, respect or disrespect, it matters. You sit behind this desk night after night, and you think because it's comedy, because it's entertainment, that gives you license to be cruel. But it doesn't. It just makes the cruelty more insidious because you dress it up as fun. Kimmel was clearly rattled now, his usual quick wit nowhere to be found. Okay, Ryan, I get it. You're upset. Maybe I came on a little strong tonight, but this is just how the game is played. You know this. You've been doing interviews for 20 years. The game? Gosling shook his head. Jimmy, this isn't a game. These are people's lives, people's careers, people's feelings you're playing with. And the fact that you think of it as a game tells me everything I need to know about who you really are underneath all that fake charm. The silence that followed was deafening. Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, his hands fidgeting with his note cards, clearly searching for some way to regain the upper hand. But Gosling wasn't finished. He placed both hands on the edge of Kimmel's desk and leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that somehow carried more weight than any shout could have. You know what really gets me, Jimmy? You're not even good at being cruel. If you're going to tear someone down, at least be clever about it. At least make it worth something. But what you did tonight, that wasn't wit. That wasn't intelligence. That was just a man so insecure about his own relevance that he has to diminish others to feel important. Kimmel's face flushed red. Whatever composure he'd been trying to maintain finally shattered. Are you kidding me right now? You're going to stand there and lecture me about relevance? I've been doing this show for over 20 years. I've interviewed presidents. I've hosted award shows. I've built an empire here. And you, what have you done? Made some indie movies that 3 people saw and convinced everyone you're deep because you stare off into the distance a lot. There, it is, Gosling said, straightening up with something that almost looked like relief. There's the real Jimmy Kimmel, not the guy who hides behind jokes and pretends he's just having fun. The guy who's actually bitter, who's actually angry, who needs to prove he's better than everyone who sits in that chair. You know what's funny, Jimmy? I came here tonight ready to talk about my work, ready to be gracious, ready to give your audience something genuine. But you couldn't handle that, could you? You couldn't handle someone just being real. The producers in the booth were in full panic mode now. The assistant director was making cutting motions across his throat, but the cameras kept rolling. This was live television at its most raw and unpredictable. Kimmel stood up from behind his desk, his voice rising to match his guest's intensity. "You want real, Ryan? Here's real. You think you're better than this show, better than me, better than everyone. You walk around Hollywood like you're some kind of artist, like you're above the business, but you're not. You're just another pretty face who got lucky, and deep down you know it." Gosling smiled for the first time since the interview began, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Lucky? Jimmy, let me tell you about luck. Luck would have been if you had decided to be a decent human being tonight instead of whatever this is. Luck would have been if you had used your platform to actually connect with people instead of using it to feed your own ego. But you made your choice, and now you get to live with the consequences." "Consequences?" Kimmel laughed, but it sounded forced and hollow. "What consequences? This is my show, my network, my audience. You think anyone's going to remember this tomorrow? You think anyone cares about your little tantrum?" The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Gosling accepted it with a calm that was somehow more frightening than any explosion of anger could have been. "You're right, Jimmy. This is your show, and after tonight, that's exactly what people are going to remember. They're going to remember the night Jimmy Kimmel showed everyone who he really is. They're going to remember the night a talk show host was so threatened by a guest's authenticity that he had to try to destroy it on live television. And they're going to remember how it backfired spectacularly." Kimmel was breathing heavily now, his carefully constructed television persona completely abandoned. "Get out. Just get out of here. You want to leave so badly, there's the door. Walk out. Prove my point about what a prima donna you are." "You know what, Jimmy? I will leave. But not because you're telling me to, and not because I'm running away from this conversation. I'm leaving because I have too much respect for your audience to let this continue. They didn't come here tonight to watch you have a public breakdown. They came here to be entertained, to feel good, to maybe learn something. And you've failed them completely." Gosling turned toward the audience, his voice carrying easily across the silent studio. "I want to apologize to all of you for what you've had to witness tonight. You deserved better than this. You deserved a host who would treat his guests with respect, who would ask interesting questions, who would create something worth your time. Instead, you got to watch someone use cruelty as entertainment, and I'm sorry you had to see that." The audience began to murmur, some people nodding in agreement. Kimmel, realizing he was losing even his own crowd, made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "Oh, this is rich. Now you're turning my own audience against me? Real classy, Ryan. Real professional." Gosling turned back to face Kimmel one final time. "Professional? Jimmy, I've been nothing but professional. I've answered your questions. Honestly, I've tried to have a real conversation. I've given you every opportunity to salvage this situation. But you kept pushing, kept trying to humiliate me, kept trying to make me into some kind of villain for your entertainment. Well, congratulations. You got your moment. But it's not the moment you thought you were getting." He walked toward the edge of the stage, then paused and looked back. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Jimmy? When I leave here tonight, I'm going to go home and think about how I could have handled this better, how I could have been kinder, how I could have found a way to connect instead of letting this turn into a confrontation. But you? You're going to go home and try to figure out how to spin this, how to make yourself look like the victim, how to blame me for your own behavior. And that's the real tragedy here." Kimmel was left standing behind his desk, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to find words that wouldn't come. The studio was completely silent except for the hum of the cameras and the distant sound of Gosling's footsteps as he walked off the stage. As he reached the curtain, he turned one final time to face the audience. "Thank you for listening tonight. I hope you'll remember that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, even when they're sitting in that chair. And with that, Ryan Gosling walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live stage, leaving behind a host who had completely lost control of his own show, an audience that had witnessed something unprecedented, and a moment that would be talked about for years to come. The cameras kept rolling for another few seconds, capturing Kimmel's stunned expression, before finally cutting to commercial. So there you have it, the night Ryan Gosling exposed Jimmy Kimmel's true character on live television. What did you think about Gosling's handling of the situation? Did he go too far? Or was Kimmel completely out of line from the start? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories like this one. Which moment from this confrontation do you think will be remembered most?